and welcome to this live chat from Swedish Institute of Space Physics in Kiruna. We call it IRF, and outside it's snowing today. Yeah, right now it's the World Space Week 2021, and we are celebrating women in space. So World Space Week is the largest space event on Earth to inspire and stimulate space science and education. My name is Anneli Klint Nilsson, and with me today I have Dr. Hayley Williamson. She's a postdoc at IRF. Hayley, what do you think of when I say Valentina Tereshkova, Svetlana Savitskaya, Sally Ride, Cecilia Payne, Gopashkin, Jocelyn Bell Burnell, Christina Koch, and Jessica Mayer?
Well, they're all women in space, so quite a few of them are astronauts. So Valentina Tereshkova was the first woman in space, and then Sally Ride was the first American woman in space, who I heard about a lot growing up. She was a very interesting person. I read a biography about her a few years ago, and she's very inspiring. But then there's also a couple female scientists in there as well. So Cecilia Payne Gopashkin was the first woman to get a PhD in astrophysics from Harvard, which is in and of itself a really great accomplishment. But she was also the first person to discover that the sun was made of predominantly hydrogen and helium, which is really important to the study of astronomy and planetary science. And then Jocelyn Bell Burnell was the first person to discover these stars that send out radio waves on a regular basis called pulsars, which are used as these sort of beacons to study things that are very far away. So she's also very important. And yeah, there are also women from a lot of different countries. So Jessica Mayer is Swedish, of course. And I think that really emphasizes that women in space is an international community. There are women in space all over the world, which is why it's World Space Week, right? So yeah, it's really great.
But Hayley, you're also an inspiring woman.
Thank you.
Can you tell us something about your research?
My primary method of research is looking at data from spacecraft that orbit other bodies in the solar system. And I haven't necessarily really restricted myself to one body in the solar system. When I was in graduate school, I studied Mars. But my work here at IRF uses data from the Rosetta spacecraft. And Rosetta was the first spacecraft to orbit a comet. It followed the comet 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko for 2 years. And what I look at from the Rosetta spacecraft is data from an instrument built here at IRF, the Ion Composition Analyzer. And I look at the interaction of the comet's atmosphere with the solar wind, which is the stream of charged particles that comes off the sun and goes throughout the solar system. And what's interesting about a comet is that the size of its atmosphere changes depending on how close it is to the sun. And Rosetta followed Comet 67P throughout the point where it was closest to the sun, and then as it moved farther away. And so what I look at is comparing data from different points in the mission to see how the cometary atmosphere and solar wind interaction changed depending on the size of the cometary atmosphere.
Oh, really interesting work.
Thanks.
Yeah. But you're from Virginia in USA, and you moved up to Kiruna in the very north of Sweden where it's snowing today.
Yes.
I mean, what's it like to work as a female scientist in US compared to Europe?
Well, Sweden has some advantages. For one thing, I get a lot more vacation time here, which is just amazing. Although I haven't made very good use of it the past couple of years because travel's been a bit difficult. But Kiruna is also just a really wonderful place to be. And what's been nice for me personally here is that there are quite a lot of other early career female scientists here. So it's been really nice to have that group of people to work with and to be friends with. But I think that on a sort of Europe versus US level, there are some similar problems in terms of what it's like being a woman in science. And one thing that I have noticed is true here in Europe as well as in the United States is that female scientists often end up doing these kinds of outreach or organizational volunteer positions. And when you do these sorts of positions, you don't necessarily get the same sort of credit that you would if you were spending that time doing research and writing papers, despite the fact that these positions are also really important and the space community really wouldn't exist without women taking these positions. And that can really affect your chances for career advancement, whether you're chosen for a permanent position or a promotion, for example. And these are things that happen in the United States as well. There's also there's a fair amount of early career women, although it's still not quite 50-50 in terms of gender balance. But just like in the United States, that percentage drops off once you get to senior women. And so I think that these problems are something that we really have to work on as an international community because they're not unique to any one place. And well, sexism in science is unfortunately widespread.
Interesting to hear you saying this. But I'm really curious, how did you end up in Kiruna?
That's actually kind of a funny story. So I was looking for a job after I graduated with my PhD, and usually after a PhD you want to do a postdoc, which is what I'm doing now. So it's kind of a short-term, couple-year research position. And so I was looking for postdocs, and I was subscribed to a few different email newsletters that include job postings in them. And I saw the posting for this one, and I thought, oh, that sounds really interesting. That sounds, like spacecraft data analysis. It sounds like what I want to do, but it's a little bit different from my grad school work. So I don't know. And then I was like, it's in Sweden, and it's in this town called Kiruna. And I looked at where Kiruna was on a map, and I went, oh my gosh, that's so far north. And then I was thinking, but I recognize the name Kiruna. Where have I heard this name before? And I realized that my library had the whole Åsa Larsson series of mystery books, and I had read them all. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the town from those books. And I thought about it, and I was like, well, it really would be this kind of once-in-a-lifetime experience for me to go to north of the Arctic Circle and go to a place where I could see the aurora, which was something I had really wanted to see my entire life. And of course, the position itself sounded really amazing. So I applied for it, and they wanted to schedule an interview with me. And the people who were interviewing me were having kind of a hard time finding time in their schedule in the afternoon. And there was a 6-hour time difference between here and where I was living. And so I ended up doing my interview at 5 in the morning, my time, which was a little rough. Yeah. But I guess it went well because I ended up getting the job. Yeah. And I've been here ever since, and it's been wonderful.
So talking about inspiration, I mean, Kiruna has inspired you.
Yeah. It's really, it's great here. And with the aurora, also working in space plasma specifically, the aurora are this very nice visual representation of the types of things that I study, even though I don't study the aurora itself. So it's always very magical for me, even after 2 years. In the snow is really great too.
Yeah, but now you have seen the aurora.
Yes.
Yeah. So now we talk a little bit about your research and also about inspiring women and during the history in space science, but also out there in the space. So do we need more women in space?
Yes, absolutely, unequivocally. And there are a few reasons for this, in my opinion. First is that intelligence and the ability to do science and math, the types of science and math that are required for space science, are not unique to one gender. They're evenly distributed, so there are as many smart women as there are smart men. So when you exclude women, you're excluding a lot of smart people who have a lot of things to contribute. and there's sort of this conception that, oh, you know, girls just aren't really interested in this sort of things. Girls just aren't really interested in math. They aren't really interested in engineering. Science is just not their thing. And I don't think that's true at all. I think what happens is a lot of times young girls are sort of told that, you know, well, math is a boy thing or science is a boy thing. And they maybe don't know about these inspirational women that we talked about. They tend to hear more about the men. And so they sort of see that, okay, this is not for me. I'm not interested in it. And when we do this, we're preventing women who have a lot to contribute from actually being part of the field. And not only is this unfortunate for the women who don't get those opportunities, but it's also unfortunate for the field itself, because they've done research that shows that when you have a more diverse group of people, you're more able to be more objective, and your science ends up being actually better, because diverse people bring new perspectives, and fresh perspectives are really important in science, because people from another walk of life essentially might be able to see things in a way that you might not have thought of. And science is really, you're solving puzzles. And when you have people who might be able to look at the puzzle, sometimes you are better able to solve it.
Okay, so maybe you have something before when you were a kid and where you are right now. Do you have something you can tell a little bit more about this from your career?
Well, you know, I actually really hated math when I was a kid.
Okay.
I don't really know why. I just didn't really like it. But then I took astronomy and physics my last year of high school, and I went, oh my gosh, these are really cool. They're really interesting. And so I decided to take physics and calculus when I got to college, in my first year of college. And it turns out, even though I didn't really like the math that I did when I was younger, I really love calculus. And I really love physics. And I also had really great professors in college who helped me realize that that's what I wanted to do. And I had some professors who were like, you should major in math, you're really good at it. Oh. And so I was like, okay, I guess. And that was a really good decision for me. I ended up really loving it. And also when I was in college, I got an opportunity to do a couple of internships at NASA, which is, of course, you know, was very exciting for me. And the project that I did during these internships was my first exposure to doing planetary data research. Okay. So I studied some Venus data from a mission that orbited Venus back in the 70s and 80s, Pioneer Venus Orbiter.
How was that?
It was really exciting, and I mean, I'm certainly a lot better at research now, but it was a really good experience in that it taught me what it was like to do spacecraft data analysis, and sort of awakened this desire in me to keep doing that as a career, to want to do research specifically on planetary atmospheres, which is really what I focus on now.
Okay, and I mean Rosetta, and Venus.
Yeah, well,
if you have the opportunity to take one of them.
Oh, well, I don't want to choose.
That's a good answer,
yeah,
because it says a lot about space science.
Yeah, they're all interesting, and the nice thing about the work that I do, the atmosphere interactions with the solar wind, is it applies to really lots of places in the solar system. So even though the specifics might be different, the physics, the broad physics, are pretty much the same. So planetary science is nice in that it's quite interdisciplinary, and that just because you focus on one thing doesn't mean you can't also study another thing.
Yeah. That's a nice way to explain, like space. It never stops.
Yeah.
It's endless.
Yeah.
So just explore. Yeah. So, I mean, you have mentioned it, but what is the best thing working with space?
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's cool. I love thinking about how this data I'm working with comes from this spacecraft that was, millions of kilometers away from us, and just orbiting this entire other world that's very different from Earth. And I love that. I love trying to solve this puzzle of what's happening elsewhere in the solar system. It's just very cool to me, and I don't think it'll ever stop being cool.
Tell me a little bit about something about these puzzles.
Well, frequently with spacecraft data, sometimes you go into it knowing exactly what you're looking for, and then other times, which has happened to me a few times, you have a piece of data and you look at it and you say, oh, that's weird. What is that? And then you have this challenge of trying to explain the data with the physics. And so there's really a large aspect of applying the physics that we know from theory to the data we see. And the specifics of that can get quite complicated. And so trying to sort of tease out exactly what's going on is a lot like solving a puzzle.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. Mm. Yeah. Well, I know it's maybe a lot of young girls out there or women who wants to work with space. I mean, what is your best advice to those women?
Yeah, I have a couple of pieces of advice, I think. And the first is that, unfortunately, you do have to be prepared to face sexism. So you will encounter times where you will have men talk over you because they don't take you seriously, or be condescending because they think you're not as smart as them. And I know that sounds depressing, but I think it's important to go into space science, and I think this applies for other sciences as well. Being prepared, knowing what you're in for, that way you're not sort of blindsided by it. And I think you can, if you're prepared, you can kind of build this armor so that these things don't affect you as much, knowing that, okay, this is a thing that happens, but I can get past this. And another big important thing is that because being a woman in space can be quite isolating, I think it's important to build a network of other women that you can associate with, and not just your peers, so like other students if you're a student, or postdocs or what have you, but also more senior women who have already been through what you're going through and can sort of advise you on how they were able to get through this thing. So I think really getting to know other women and talking to other women is very important for helping you to get through these barriers that men in space science don't necessarily face. I think what's also important is to recognize that there are these barriers, and so you may not feel like you're accomplishing enough when you compare yourself to your male peers. But like I said, oftentimes that's because women take these sort of volunteer positions, which I think are important to do. And so I think it's good to try not to compare yourself so much and constantly say, well, I could be doing more, and just do the best that you can, and that's enough. And yeah, and I definitely think that being around other women helps with this sort of feeling of being isolated and not feeling like you're doing a good enough job. So I think that would really be my main piece of advice, is try to find a program or a position where you won't be alone.
Yeah. Really good advice, and you really are an inspiring woman. Yeah.
Thank you.
So you are watching live from Kiruna, Swedish Institute of Space Physics. And as I said in the beginning, it's snowing outside. Maybe we will see some aurora later. Thanks for all. And this is it for now.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thanks for watching.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.